Are you an American traveling in Europe? What do you imagine the Europeans are saying about you? Americans traveling in Europe is a common laughingstock to Europeans, but that doesn't need to be the case. And in this video, I'm going to teach you how. How can you travel Europe as an American while still feeling more European? And hi, if you're new to the channel, this is called The Spore, and my name is Taro. In this channel, I share ideas and lessons I've learned in life, or spores, about things being an entrepreneur, working with mushrooms, but also being a parent. And for this video specifically, I am a European. I was born and raised in Finland. I've lived in 3 other countries in Europe, UK, France, and Switzerland. And I've spent the last decade living in the US, and my wife is American, but every summer we go with our kids to Europe. Now, a short disclaimer. Europe is not one place. There are cultural similarities between European countries as shown by Eurovision and football World Championships or Euro Cup or Champions League, but there are also a lot of differences. Greece is not the same as Ireland, and Finland is not the same as Portugal. And that's understandable, and there are differences that I'm also going to cover, but by and large, there's also a lot more similarities than Europeans would often allow you to believe. First tip, if you want to travel in Europe like a European, is do not travel in July and August, because those are the months when Europeans are on vacation. Now that's counterintuitive. You're like, hey, I want to be like Europeans, so they're on vacation in July and August. Why wouldn't I be in vacation in July and August? But if you want to really understand the culture and explore it, it's probably better if you travel when people are not on vacation in those cities. You'll get more out of that culture. Now, if you absolutely have to travel in July and August, the kids are on holiday or whatever, that's the only time possible, I would generally say is that if you are planning to spend time in Central and Southern Europe, do rather July than August. They both kind of suck, but it's better August, like Italians are on vacation in August. And if you want to travel in August, go to Northern Europe. For example, Scandinavians are often from midsummer, so late June to July are on vacation, and August, a lot of people are back in town or back in the place. You could also travel to really remote countries or places in the countryside to avoid the crowds, but avoid July and August. May is awesome. June is mostly awesome. September is probably my favorite month to travel in Europe. And yeah, some places you can get away with other months too, but avoid July and August. My second tip is do not do Europe, especially in 7 to 10 days. I often talk to my American friends who are planning to go to Europe, or they've gone to Europe and they're like, oh yeah, we did Europe or some version of that. And then I asked how long they were there, and they were there for like 7 to 10 days, max 2 weeks usually. And they did the whole Europe. Like mentioned in the beginning, I've lived in 4 countries. I've visited most of European countries, and I feel like I've seen maybe 25% of Europe at best. And there's just a lot to see and a lot to learn. And there's a lot of history and culture. So if you end up going to Europe, it's okay to go for 7 to 10 days. If you can do more, I would recommend a month, but I understand that that's not feasible for most people. If you go to 7 to 10 days, choose 2 places. Ideally, probably in the same country, try to get deeper into that culture. Just go to Portugal, choose 2 places in Portugal, Lisbon and somewhere quiet, and try to get to know those places instead of trying to do 1 day in Switzerland, 1 day in Italy. You get the point. And why this is so important is Europe is so much about culture and history, and to enjoy culture and history, you gotta dive a little deeper. While there are some tourist sites in Europe that I could recommend, but most of them, I would just say the best part about being in Europe or different countries is sitting in a cafe, walking around, and really learning about the habits and history of that place. And if you rush through tourist sites and top visited places, you're probably gonna just meet other tourists. You don't wanna be the American who does Italy in 5 to 7 days and visits Rome, Florence, and Venice and sees the same museums everyone else has seen, just so you can say back home that I did go there. One way to be more European in Europe is to walk a lot or bike, depending on the city, or if you need to go somewhere, take public transport instead of renting a car or taking a taxi, but walking a lot, like spend most of your days walking, some biking, some public transport. You'll see more, you'll experience more, you'll see how the locals behave, and you'll get a better understanding of the culture, and you're probably gonna fit in better. Talking about fitting in, clothing is probably one of the #1 ways how you spot an American, with compression socks and 2 short shorts and backpack, and probably a shirt that's from a university, University of Indiana, or a sports team, Kansas City Chiefs or whatever. You probably want to avoid that if you want to try to fit in. Like, don't wear a university shirt or a sports team shirt, or even big branding in general. Now, there are subcultures in Europe that are very flashy, big brand subcultures, but by at large, branding is a lot smaller and more subtle. And if you have to wear a sports team, you probably want to wear a football team or soccer team jersey, just so you know there will be fans and haters of that team, so you will get it both ways if you want to take that chance. But generally, don't wear sports teams and American clothing and compression socks. If I talk to my European friends, or what do you think is a stereotypical American tourist, they usually often say loud, or someone who doesn't know the language. Now, I would argue, if I'm completely unbiased, that Americans are not the loudest crowd. I think drunk Germans probably take the win there. But they are pretty loud and often don't know any of the local languages. If you're a European who's not even good at languages, you probably still know some of the basics of each language, or at least some sayings or greetings. And you're on the quiet side, observant if you're not in your home country. If you're loud, unless it's, again, a sporting event or you're very, very drunk, you're probably going to be more observant and curious. And that's what I would recommend to you, is rather than being really loud and think you know it all, assume you know nothing, be really curious, ask a lot of questions, and then avoid large crowds. I've noticed that Americans, when they go to Europe, even at the younger kids, when they go to a hostel, then there's suddenly 20 Americans together, or they go with their family and it's a big crowd, and then they just talk to each other and they don't talk to any locals, and they start laughing and joking around, which is something I love about the American culture. It's very fun and lighthearted, but at the same time, like, you're probably gonna come across as very American if it's 10 to 20 Americans laughing out loud together going from A to B. By the way, there's one thing that I think Americans should keep doing that will tell that they're probably not European, but they will be treated better, and that's tipping. Europeans do not tip almost ever. There are very, very few exceptions to that rule. Americans love to tip on almost anything. And that is one of the reasons why certain people treat Americans slightly better if they're in a more touristy area, because they know that Americans do tip versus Europeans don't. You do not need to tip or tip much, but if you do, it will probably help out in many ways, especially if you stay in the same area for a while and you end up going to the same cafe or place multiple times. They will give you more local tips and insights, and you'll get to know them better. So tipping, while not European at all, can help you actually integrate better. So maybe keep that. Some of my favorite places in Europe is that if you're a nature lover, I think Norway and the Western fjords, and there's so many places. Now, some of the fjords are very famous and many people visit, but they still half empty. Iceland is great, and I think a lot of parts, if you love the Alps, then I think the Italian part of the Alps is probably my favorite. There's less people and the food is better. You get the punctuality of Swiss with the food of Italy. That's a pretty good combo. If you're interested in having a fun time and really getting to know locals, I would recommend Eastern Europe, which technically is really the Central Europe. People just call it Eastern Europe, but there's a lot of places in that part of Europe that most tourists don't visit, but they have a lot to offer. It's very cheap. You'll probably get to know more locals. And I think you'll get to know the culture better. So I could recommend things like Budapest is a beautiful, beautiful city where you can have a great time. Prague used to be one of my favorite cities, but I think that's kind of now overrun a little bit. But you could do Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia, for example, could be a very interesting place to go and visit. Albania, Slovenia is nice. I think Croatia is pretty crowded. And if you've never been to Europe and you want a guaranteed good time, I usually just say Italy has it all. Northern Italy is probably the greatest place. If you happen to go in the south, probably Capri and Positano might be a little crowded. Ischia might be an interesting option. And then Greece, especially if you choose some of the medium to smaller islands that still have a ferry, you'll probably have an amazing experience. It's hard to go wrong in Greece. That's it. That's my tips on how to travel Europe like a European, even if you're very American. Did I miss out on a tip? You can leave a comment below. Or if you disagree, I'm not going to be offended. If you enjoy the content, hit the thumbs button, hit the subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Ciao, ciao.